my YouTube videos. It's Crystal here. I want to make another video about Excel. If you notice in my last video, I was talking about 3 functions that I use in my work, being sort, filter, and view. And I was showing you how to use those functions in a fake data set that I created. Well, I had something I had to do during the week, and I did use those functions, sort, filter, and view. And then I got home and I thought about it, and I thought, well, you didn't need to do that because I did it all manually with sort, filter, and view. And then I took the results and I wrote the results down on a sheet of paper. And then after I wrote the results down on a sheet of paper, I transferred them over to another spreadsheet that I was asked to complete. Well, what happened was I got home and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, you didn't need to do all that. You could have used a pivot table. So I didn't use a pivot table in that one instance. I used sort, filter, and view. But I thought about it, and so I made a fake data set, which is what you're seeing right now. And I'm going to do it in a pivot table, and I'm going to recreate what we did. And so basically, this is to do with waste, and it's completely fake data. It's just data that I've made up. I sat at home and I made this data set from memory. But the first thing we want to do, I think, so I've already used the filter, so not the filter, the view. I've already used the view, so we've frozen the top row. So you can see that the top row is frozen. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead, and what I had done is I was asked to take this backing data, which was a really big spreadsheet, or it's big for me, full of tabular data. And then whenever I made it full of tabular data, I used the filter. I didn't really sort it, but I used filter. And then I used filter to take all the data that I was looking for, and I wrote it down on paper. And then after I had written all this information down on paper, I transferred it over to another spreadsheet. And now the thing that you have to keep in mind is we've got this backing data and all the information that you're looking for. Not all of it, but most of the information that you're looking for is in the backing data, because not only did I have to use the backing data, I had to use the invoices as well. And it's not in here, but one of the things that they were asking for was method of disposal method. So it could have been empty, it could have been disposed, and it could have been exchanged, or whatever else. But I did not include that in my fake data. And the reason why I did that is because that data is not in the backing data. That data was in the invoice. So I had to go through and look through the invoices as well to decide whether it was just disposal, empty, or exchange, or anything else that they were requesting. So what we're going to do now is we're going to recreate what I've done, and we're going to do it in a pivot table. The type of waste is going to be either clinical or domestic. And then you've got the locations of different towns. You've got the date, and these are all dates in November. And then this is a description of the waste. And then you had the container that the waste was in. You had the size of the container. You had how many tons they took. and then you had cost. And this is information completely made up. I just sat here on my computer and I was just thinking, trying to make up some data. And then on the other spreadsheet that we had to convert all this information into, it had all this information as well, but it was separated into clinical and domestic. So you had one page for clinical and then you had another page for domestic. So that's why some of it's clinical and some of it's domestic. So we're going to come over here. We're going to make a pivot table. I didn't do this in real life, but I got home and I thought, well, you could have made a pivot table and it would have been a lot easier, a lot more automated, a lot less time consuming. And so that's why I'm doing that. So you go insert and you say pivot table. And then so we're going to do the pivot table in a new worksheet. We're going to put the pivot table in a new worksheet. So it says the table range is waste A1 to H24, which means that I have 24 rows of data. So I'm going to say, okay, it's going to be a new worksheet. So we've got our new worksheet. So the first thing that we want is we want type of waste. So we're going to have that separated into type of waste. And then we're going to say location. And then so it's going to be clinical and domestic. And then for every location. We're not going to do dates. And the reason why we're not going to do dates is because we were using the backing data for the entire spreadsheet. So I had done it for the year. So we're not going to do dates. We're going to do description. And we're going to do the container. I'm just wondering over here, because obviously so I'm just wondering. Put it over here in container. I'm not really sure about that. I don't really like that. Move it back over here. Maybe do description here. But I'm not really sure about that either. I don't like that either. Let's redo it. Because I'm just doing this from scratch. I'm trying to figure this out as I do it. So you've got description. And then you've got the container. You've got the size of the container. You've got weight in tons. And then you've got cost. So that's how we would do the pivot table. So the pivot table, it's broken down. it's broken down into clinical and domestic. And then you got a grand total of how many tons of waste you collected and emptied, and the cost of that. And this is, so you've got, we're going to say that you had Bracknell, you had infectious incineration, which was a yellow bin lid of 770. And so that would give you 0.5 at a cost of 335. And then you had infectious sharp waste, which is a yellow bin lid of 0.1 at 50. And then you had offensive waste, which was a black bin lid of 450. Then we had Reading. You had anatomical waste of 0.3 tons at 200, and it was a wheeled bin of 770 liters. You had cytoxic waste. I didn't know what color the anatomical waste was in, so that's why I didn't put a bin color in. You had cytoxic waste, which was a gray lid bin of 770. And I don't know what color a cytoxic waste should be. And I don't know if it should be gray or blue or purple. So these are just colors that I just made up. So don't think, oh, if it's cytoxic waste, it has to be gray bin, because gray lid, because this is completely made up data. I sat on my computer at home and did it. So don't think, oh, if it's cytoxic waste, it has to be a gray lid. Then we had infectious incineration, which was a yellow lid bin at 770 liters with 1 ton at 665. Then you had infectious sharps, which was a yellow lid bin of half a ton of 300 pounds. Then you had infectious treatment, which was an orange lid bin, and it was 1.5 tons at 1,000 pounds. Then you had pharmaceutical waste, which was a blue lid bin, which was 0.05 tons at 50 pounds. Now we have Reading offensive waste. So I thought all that was Reading. So we've got another Reading here, which is offensive waste, which was 2 tons. So we've got, and it's 1,500 pounds. And now we're going to go to Windsor. So you had infectious incineration, which was a yellow lid bin at 0.5 ton at 335. Then you had infectious sharps, which was a yellow lid bin at 0.25 ton at 150. And then you had infectious treatment, an orange lid bin of 770 liters at 330. You had offensive waste, which was a black lid bin, which was 1 ton at 750. And then we had domestic waste, which is non-clinical. So in Bracknell, you had commercial waste, which was 1 ton, which was a wheeled bin of 1,100 liters at 400. You had mixed recycles, no class, which was a wheeled bin, 1,100 liters, which was half a ton at 200. And then you had Reading, which was card and paper, which was a quarter of a ton at 100, which was a wheeled bin of 1,100. You had commercial waste, which was a wheeled bin of 1,100 liters, which was 1 ton at 400. You had confidential waste for shredding, which was in a 50-liter sack, which was 0.1 at 50. and you had mixed recyclables, no glass, which was a wheeled bin of 1,100 liters at 1 ton at 400. You had the university, which was another location. So you had confidential waste for shredding, which was a 50-liter sack, and it's 0.1 ton, and it was 50 pounds. Then you had Windsor. So you had commercial waste and a wheeled bin, 1,100 liters, which was 0.5 at 200. And then you had mixed recyclables, no glass, which was 1,100 wheeled bin at half a ton at 200. So the total tonnage was 13.45 tons, and the total monies that it's going to cost was 7,965. And this is a little bit different than the way that I personally had done it when I wrote it down on a sheet of paper. The way I had it written down on a sheet of paper was more like that. When I had it written down on a sheet of paper was more like that. But what you can do is you can you had your description as a column, and a container as a column, and the size container as a column. So what you could do is you can experiment with that. So let's just say here, description. So you can experiment with the way you want to do it. But that's not how I want to do it. That's not. So we've got the sum is the way we want it, and we've got the sums is definitely the way that we want it. The type of waste is okay. The location is okay. But what you can do is you can experiment. I mean, you can do it this way because it does give you the information. You can do it this way, or you can experiment with other ways that you would like to do it. Like, because the columns is going to be the sum of weight and the sum of cost. That's going to be your columns. And then you've got your values, sum of weight and sum of cost. And you can experiment. And it's not exactly what I like, but if you're in a hurry and you don't want to write it all down on paper, then you can do it that way. So that concludes this video on how to create a pivot table on waste. It's not exactly the way I would have liked to have done it. I mean, the way that I did it on the paper was more like this, more like columns of information. So I had the location, and then I had the description, I had the container, I had the size of the container, I had the weight in tons and the cost. But that if you've got a lot of time, then that's, in my opinion, preferable. But if you're in a hurry and you're in a bind for time, then this is another way that you can do it, which is a lot quicker. So that concludes this video. The pivot table wasn't exactly what I wanted, but it was a pivot table, and it will give you the information. So if you like my video, please like and subscribe, and I will be making more technical videos for you in the very near future.